Hi, my name is Matt Wyman. I'm CEO and co-founder of Acario. We provide evaluation of voice and text agents so you can find all the edges and issues before your customers do. Today, I am really happy to have Henry Poydar with us. And Henry is really focusing on one of the biggest challenges in AI adoption, which is how organizations can actually trust autonomous agents in production and get them out there and get them doing real work. Henry, maybe you can actually give more detail to that and explain really in more depth what you're up to.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Matt. Henry Poydar. I run a company called Steady at runsteady.com. And our software is for digital teams. It automates coordination loops, big picture loops around projects and initiatives and goals, and day to day loops around team interactions. And what we're doing now is building autonomous agents into those loops. So it's getting really interesting. I think, the world is very much familiar with what I'll call single player agents. And Matt, you and I have talked about this in the past. And the single player agents, I have them running right now, my Claudes, my Codex, my Coworks, my things that are working for me. And I'm the conduit still to my team for any kind of coordination matters. But now what's happening is that we have autonomous agents who are really taking on jobs, not just performing very discrete tasks. And so what's happening is they are out of these coordination loops, and we're seeing all sorts of problems with trust and validation and evaluation along the way. And so, yeah, it's a great time for you and I to have this conversation because I think we're both coming at this problem from different angles to try and solve it.
And trying to be users of it, right? We're
That's right.
trying to
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
push these edges and actually
Right.
experience it ourselves. Cool. Let's dig in just for a moment on what it means around what does autonomy really mean? And maybe just go a little deeper on single player, multiplayer, because I know when we first talked about this, um, I was still tripping in many of the sort of single players chained together as opposed to real autonomy in the way you mean it. So maybe let's go a little deeper on autonomy.
Yeah. So the single player multiplayer I mean, I think of it in the true video game metaphor, right? Because that helps me figure it out. But I do think that when you think of an assistant, so an agent going off and doing things for you, you personally, like even OpenClaw bills itself as the world's greatest AI personal assistant. That's the single player mode. And I think there's a level of autonomy there that is still probably semi-autonomous, right? Because they are off doing things in pursuit of a job, but you are in the loop kind of managing them at the same time, like much more than you would, say, a human personal assistant. Now, I think things get really interesting in the multiplayer world. And what I mean by multiplayer, and I think there's a few definitions floating out around out there. What I mean is an agent that has a job, not necessarily performing a task that might be part of the job, but has a job as a role, just like a human would, and is in service of a group of people or a team or a company. So something like a Devin or a Charlie, or even the semi-autonomous agents that you see on GitHub that are doing constant interrogation of pull requests or something like that. Those are things that don't necessarily report to Henry or report to Matt. They're something that the whole team is taking advantage of. And those are the multiplayer agents that I mean. And then to layer the notion of autonomy on top of that, um, and again, I come back to the job thing because it's easy for me to understand, is that when an agent has a job, not just has a workflow or a task, then I think we're in the autonomous world, right? So there's an LLM in the mix, there's the world in the mix, there's an outcome, and then the agent black box is the autonomous thing that's making it all happen and come together. How does that jive with your
It totally does. I think one of the
understanding
keys for
of
me
autonomy?
when I was first learning about this frame was shifting my perspective from I've deployed a series of agents that can go perform tasks for me and even long running tasks that are outcome oriented, shifting from there to actually these agents or these systems are out there and my entire team has access to them. and we're all providing information into them, and maybe even all contributing different direction that it has to sort from. And it really underscores the importance of that word you just used, which is outcome. So still a lot of agents are measured on the task performance, which is really, I mean, you could get an outcome out of a task, but really it's a smaller grain than most outcome changes are. So then when you have a human who's going off to do a task, the question becomes one of trust, right? So, and I know you talk about this quite a lot. So help us help link. Okay, I have this agent in the world. It's multiplayer. That is to say, many team members are now working with it. It has real autonomy to go get to an outcome. Now, how do I like link for me from there to that really critical piece of trust and how you think about that through line?
Yeah. I think the first thing to do is to separate the notion of trust from performance. So one thing that I think is happening with autonomous agents is they are performing really, really well, right? Because you are, and that has a lot to do with how they're provided context.
Hmm.
And it's usually in a one shot method. That's usually the method that we see is like, okay, this agent has a job. Its job is to monitor the infrastructure and to make some adjustments and tune as needed to the firewall settings or whatever as traffic comes in. Okay, go. The prompt has been made. The agent's off doing it. But the agent is never reaching back in to get adjustments there, right? That's what I'm saying is that's not a performance problem. Like these things are performing really really well and doing their jobs really really well. The problem is that, and this comes back to trust, is when you notice that the outcomes are wrong, um, you don't trust the agent that it did its job. But actually, what happened was it did do its thing, what it was supposed to do really really well. So it's missing in order to get to trust and in order to rely on those outcomes, which I suppose is probably the notion of trust at the end of the day. You you have to find a mechanism for these agents to actually, we'll call it self-correct, or to reach back in to adjust their job based on additional context that is happening. So it's a long-winded way of saying, like, we don't trust the agents right now. I'm starting to jump ahead a little bit and talk about a solution, but when I say trust, for the purposes of this, it means that the outcome is incorrect, but it's not a performance problem, if that makes sense.
It's fascinating because there's still a lot of conversation about failure rates being really high.
Right.
And high failure rates, mm, I'm starting to believe that many of these high failure rates are due to poor guidance.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little bit like an overeager. If you were to bring a person into a situation and they're just hyper eager to solve and make it work and do the thing, they may go off and take actions that you absolutely do not want them to take. But they're hyper eager and you never gave them any guidance as to what to do and where the edges are or even how to think about it. We, when we're working with people, rely on a lot of knowledge that came, a lot of, we'll call it context and memory, but a lot of knowledge that they draw from other parts of their life, other experiences they've had, other jobs that they've done. And now we're having to actually think about how to distill that into guidance. And so they have an outcome. And it, for me, a lot of trust is actually accountability. It's about how to see the link back. So you gave them something to go do. You said, go take these actions, go on this path. My trust comes from knowing that I can actually measure back what action was actually taken and see it, which is not, that itself is not a simple activity. But I think the accountability link is the one for me that really underscores getting to trust. Um, and when you start to get to, so I'm curious how you think about this as you start to think about like a whole network or collection that's working together and how to make this efficient for the humans that are working with this collection of agents.
Yeah. Well, I think the key word that you said there is human. And, back to the hyper eager employee thing. I would even go a step farther. It's not just a hyper eager employee. They're the terminator. right? They're going to go off and do this thing, and they're, as Arnold,
They're gonna make it
they're never
happen.
going to stop. They're just going to keep on going, and that's what we have here. So what, and the reason I say the keyword is humans, like we had to solve this problem for human teams, right? And it's been trusted accountability is a thing that we had before, way before the agents came along. And the way that it's traditionally been solved is by balancing accountability and autonomy, right? And that's where as you know, how I think about trust is when those two things are balanced. Because particularly with knowledge work, if you are too heavy on the accountability side, then you're into kind of like micromanagement, and there's no breathing room for actual like real work to happen. You're just kind of like babysitting on top of it all in command and control. You're not actually getting value out of the domain expertise of the human, right?
You're also making a lot of presumptions about
And you're making a lot of
process,
presumptions.
method. You're not actually allowing for any solutioning or creativity.
That's right. That's right. And that's where the magic happens. Now, if you go too heavy on autonomy, and you just let then we're on the spectrum of the problems that we're talking about today, right? Which is like it's going to go off and be the Terminator and do the wrong thing really, really well. So the way we've solved this for humans is to create a loop of accountability and autonomy. And traditionally, that's done by declaring intent. So on a human team, you might do something, or agile teams might do a stand-up meeting. And, I think a lot of people forget this about agile and what problem it was solving. It was solving the trust problem, really. It's like, I don't trust these teams to actually build the right thing through waterfall, so I need this other method. And the key part of like a stand-up, which is one of the rituals of an agile meeting, is where people declare intent, right? And they say what they're going to work on. I say to Matt and the rest of the team what I'm going to work on. Matt says to Henry and the rest of the team what he's going to do. And then the next day we have a stand-up. We look back and say, well, yesterday you said you were going to do this. What did you accomplish? And so when you look at those accomplishments versus those attentions, that's how you can get into this accountability circle without destroying autonomy. Because when you declare intent, you get three things. One, you get agency and autonomy out of the box, right? I'm declaring the intent. You're not telling me what to do. Number two, it's a management check on whether you were surfaced the right context to do the thing that you intend to do. Like if we're in a stand-up meeting and you said to me, I intend to go do this thing, and I know that it's the wrong thing, then I know that that I didn't give you the right context, right? Like because you're kind of by declaring intent, you're repeating me to back like the context when you were given, and then finally, like you're telling the future, right? So which is the ultimate management tool, because now if your intent is wrong, I can stop you before it actually happens, and we invest in something that's not going to work.
It's interesting because I'm sure we've all been around many teams of different types. Um, those meetings where everyone's backwards
Yeah.
facing on just
Yes.
this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened,
Right.
inevitably really struggle with
Yes.
planning and creativity, all sorts of things. I mean, the whole agile world. We don't need to go repeat the whole agile world, but this forward-facing concept you're raising around for agents,
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest there's still a gap. So the agent's telling you what it will do, and leaning into that planning concept. By the way, which is amazing if you're in the world of coding, asking agents to plan out what they're going to do and working with them on the plan, and then saying, "Go execute this."
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Right.
Single player mode,
Right.
but
Yes. Yes.
the accountability around outcomes and measuring outcomes, it's still hard. And I think we devolve back into the performance mentality,
Hmm.
and so I think many teams struggle with how do we measure the outcome, and how do we measure the outcome in a manner like that's realistic given the scope of capability the agents have. And this is a human problem as well, because humans are able to say, look, I did these things, and some of these things I've done won't have an effect for weeks, won't, here's my rationale for why I did them. Um, and I think so. How do you pull out the observability, the outcome, the knowledge that the agent took the action that was best past the plan?
Yeah, well, I think the important part of this is it's not just a single moment of declaring intention and measuring that against accountability. I think it's the fact that it's a loop. So when you do that over and over and over, and the way that humans did it over and over and over with like a daily stand-up meeting, is actually the whole team gets better because you're learning how intentions match to accomplishments, and you're seeing what worked and what didn't. And that informs the next time you declare intent. And
So
and
does this mean
so
you're holding mixed stand-ups? Are you
well,
intentionally
now we're
pulling a set
getting
of
to
people and a pool of
into
agents together?
the agents piece. And yes, I am saying that. I am saying that there is the notion of a mixed stand-up meeting where an agent has a job. It's an infrastructure adjustment agent. And it's going to tell you the things it's going to do until the next time that this loop is being closed, which might be the next day if it's a stand-up meeting. And it's also going to tell you what it did since the last time. And by the way, it's a computer, so it has the intents and accomplishments. It's kept a record of this. There's a memory of this, and so it can make an adjustment. Because you have to remember with this technology, um, the the IO is natural language, right? It's the same as ours. So yeah, it sounds a little far fetched to put a robot in a stand up meeting. But literally how that plays out is through some kind of async mechanism with a form and a check-in and something like that. But they do speak the same language as us, and they can adjust their intentions based on pattern matching from what they did before because they use LLMs and LLMs are really good at pattern matching. So it, it's not necessarily it's essentially updating of the context window that you're giving the agent within a loop on a regular cadence. And if you put them in the stand-up meeting, their context window is going to get adjusted every day that you have that meeting.
I mean, it makes sense. A lot of agents are still built to be reactive. When specific events come in, then they take an action. Agency, not to be confused with agent, right? Agency is a very different beast and much harder, because now you're a little more open ended. And I think there are people experimenting with different ways to solve that. And I think the loop might actually give us the first, hooks or handles to go grab onto to go there. But I'm also thinking about the tools that people use, and because the IO here is language, and because we want to have these agents which can go and perform tasks regularly for us, in many cases, tools are supposed to be things that we have that help us go faster, help us be more efficient, etc. Tools get created for lots of reasons, including visibility and management. But quite often the tools become the purpose as opposed to having the tools serve the purpose.
Mm,
They get inverted quite often.
mm,
And when I start to think about agents and access to information,
mm,
I think about all those project management tools and ticketing systems and all those different mechanisms where people decompose work into units. In many cases, the decomposition into units becomes the purpose to itself. But regardless, uh, the agents don't necessarily have free and regular access to that, nor is that necessarily the best way to communicate with the agents. And so, as you're thinking about this loops and pulling agents in, how has it changed even the most basic tooling that you're using to track? Again, I'm still a little bit stuck on this notion of how do I know? Like, what's the mechanism so I know that the agents are off doing the work I want them to and that they're being successful? Like, how do I measure that? And I think the tools and all the tools I have around me, I would expect in your model, these agents are participating in the same tool sets,
right.
unless you tell me otherwise. So
No,
I'm
no,
so
I
I'm so what about the tools? And like like how does that change when I start to really have agents that are taking on full job responsibilities.
Yeah, well, I think you need to make a distinction between declaring intent, what you're going to do, and the tools that are used to measure results and observing what happens. Right? There's a lot of that, and I don't think any of it changes. So there's logging, there's measuring performance. Declaring intent kind of doesn't have anything to do with measuring performance, right? It's a forward-looking thing. And I'll back up a sec because you brought up issue tracking. Are you familiar with Linear? Which
Mhm.
is yeah. So
But
so
not
the
everyone might be. So
yeah. So Linear is an alternative to Jira. It is an issue tracking tool. It's widely popular with developers because it's a better Jira. It really is. It's like a nicer experience. It does some things that Jira doesn't do. You're often kind of find you're fighting with Jira, but at the end of the day, it's kind of it is an issue tracking tool, and that's the category it's in. Now, the CEO of Linear put out an email or blog post like a month or two ago. I don't know if you saw this, Matt, but he said
mm-mm.
issue tracking is dead. That's what it says at the
Interesting.
issue tracking is dead. And what he's saying is that agents, because of their inherent ability to parse natural language and to summarize and to consolidate, that they don't need the same level of decomposition that an issue tracking tool needs. And so what he's kind of saying is issue tracking is a human need and a tool for humans. But moving forward, when agents are doing a lot of the execution, they're not going to need this issue tracking thing because they're going to actually take a more holistic view and they're going to actually compose work. They don't need it broken down into these little parts because they're, quote, smart enough to actually work towards a goal and then figure it out along the way without it having to be broken up for them into these little tiny parts like it did for humans. And so I think he pictures a world where you interact with Linear as an execution agent and not open up Linear and look at issues and assign the agent issues. I think he thinks that that's going away and that really you're going to interact with this agent, this autonomous thing called Linear that's going to do stuff for you. I don't know if
And
that clarifies or or
well, so
muddies
the
the
thing is, I
waters.
buy a part of it. I buy a part of that, but I don't buy
Yeah.
all of it. Um, because if I think back career wise to all these amazing people, and if I were to ask them to go do a task, they would make it happen. It would be perfect, and they'd come back. But I would have no idea what they did in between. Maybe that's okay. But then when you start to expand it out, this is going back to that balance with trust, right? That earlier balance. It isn't, especially if you want to share the work, share the load. One of the things that can happen is that people will bite off something too big. Agents can bite off something too big
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
something that starts to get outside their domain.
Right.
So it's useful to have a mechanism to represent the work being done, even if the entity doing the work doesn't necessarily need that along the way. And here I'm speaking against myself in some respects because I'm not a huge fan of project management tools, but there is some next generation visibility into the actions being taken so that one, the humans can participate, right? We need to think about this new team dynamic. What does it look like? We need to be able to participate. Uh, I suspect my intuition, and I can't say it's any more than an intuition, is that we will want to decompose some of the activities that are being done and share it out, either just because it makes it parallel. So even if Linear could do the entire task, maybe if there's a little bit more structuring to it, some of it goes to Linear, some of it goes to a person, some of it goes to, I don't know, a hand rolled agent that's really good at that one area. But if we don't have some visibility into that, which I think comes it's all intertwined for me. It's the same accountability problem, it's the observability problem, it's the trust problem, but it's also how do we actually pull the teams together and share? So, I mean, obviously you're spending time thinking about like size of task that can be given to agent and at what point it needs to be decomposed and what systems we use to communicate that back and forth and close the loop for validation. So where do you land
Yeah, well,
amongst that?
let me, I think the observability part is really, really interesting because I think that's the candidate that has the most legs for making the intentions better, right? So, the idea of the loop and the notion of self-learning and self-correction happens because there's observability, and it's happening because somehow there's a measurement on what worked and what didn't that can be linked back to the intent that produced that measurement in the first place. Under the hood, I think this is probably where maybe the paradigms could shift. I don't necessarily think that with agents that there's less of a need to break down tasks and observe them and measure them along the way. I think what I'm saying is like I still think there's absolutely the need for that level of observability, particularly when it comes to complex work like software development or the things that we're trying to get these things to do. But is it going to manifest itself in a tool that's shared by a human and an agent like a Jira or a Linear? Maybe not. I would prefer to just rely on the observability that's baked into the agent or whatever observability mechanism I have on that agent. And then what I'd like to do is for the agent, before it declares its intentions, to look at the observability system, see what happened because it's measuring what it did and what it didn't do, and then use that as the context window back in my intentions along with the rest of the context of the overall goal of what I'm trying to do.
I buy that. It's interesting because uh, we're looking at two facets of a similar problem.
Yeah.
So at Acario, a lot of what we think about is helping people stabilize and build agents that you can put into the world so they can actually start performing tasks, whatever those tasks may be. On the other side is did I give them the right tasks? And like, sure, now they're I'll put in quotes safe because who knows, that's a whole nother conversation. But let's just presume for a moment they're safe, they work correctly, they do the things they're supposed to do based on what they're asked, but there's still a long way to go to ask the right question to get them to perform the right task and bring it together. And so I've already seen with teams that are building agents that well, I'll call functional observability, which is like what's deep under the covers and how the agent, what tools it calls. Super important, but isolated. It's its own world and domain. The one that's really tough is this business level. It's this, okay, did it interact in the manner in which you wanted it to interact?
Mm.
Did
Right.
it actually seek the approach to the solution? It's not just did it get to the solution, but was the approach to the solution the type of approach we wanted to use? Um, and you see all sorts of examples of that already with voice agents in different environments. I- I'm I definitely see the argument that we may not need shared ticketing tools to gain context between, but probably we also don't want a we don't want Moby Dick to be written for us each time
Right.
an agent goes off and performs work. It's just a little
Yeah.
dense. It's a little hard to
Right.
get through.
Right.
Maybe fantastic. So it does seem like there's a new generation of tooling that's needed so that the humans can not only follow along, but readjust, give new directions, gain insights about their own business, about what it is they're trying to do. Because that's
Yeah.
actually one of the critical loops that humans provide. When
Yeah.
humans take tasks, they
Yeah.
come back. And that agile stand up you were talking about is not just what I will do, it's also there's a retrospective, there's other mechanisms in there to create learnings, which you're talking about with the feedback loop. Um, so I don't know if there's an easy answer for this, but I think we're still on this journey to figure out what are the mechanisms so we can share that context as it's happening. And and actually operate together. Uh,
Yeah, so it's my contention that the solution is not just a tool. It's my contention that the solution is a combination of tool and method. And so, when I talk about declaring intentions, yes, I run a software platform that allows that to happen. Um, but really what I mean is the method of doing that. And I do think that there is a solution here to be derived from what works over decades with human teams on basically how Matt and Henry, when they work on a team together, adjust each other's context windows. And I think that we can apply that to the robots with some adjustments and with baking in these other things like observability. Like it's a complex problem, but I think the solution overall is a combination of method and tools.
which also means people need to gather new skills and build some trust and start thinking about this.
That's right.
I also,
Back to
uh,
trust. Yes.
yeah, and also um, self reflection and clarity in what they're
Yeah.
asking for. I
Right.
think that we are all being held to a higher bar now in what we ask for when we interact. We need to actually describe. We can't just wave our hands at it. Not that
Yeah.
anyone should ever have done that, but
Yeah.
it happens more often than not
Yes.
that
Yes.
people just sort of like go fix this, and
Yeah.
they didn't
Yeah. And
really say anything
didn't
else.
work.
It's not
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm bring it back to let's bring it back to the people for a moment. Like,
Mm.
what kinds of skills do you think people need to go work on to be ready for this collaborative loop that you're imagining in the future? Like, what do we all have to improve in, focus on, and do?
Well, I think, and again, like I do think, like it's not like we mastered teamwork before the agents came along, right? So I think all of those things that we would do to be better leaders and managers and contributors, we're going to still have to keep on doing and still have to do that properly. I think, there's a paradigm shift in learning the skills in order to provide context that I think the jury's still out on how that could work well. I mean, I have a theory about it because the IO is the same, like you said before, but certainly that's a skill, and we're seeing that, and we're seeing new and novel ways of programming these probability machines that always do the average, right? So, so we want them to do above average stuff. You got to kind of have a skill that's, I don't know. It's because it's natural language is the new C++, right? So I guess I so headline is there's traditional human interaction skills that we could always improve on and be better. I mean, the greatest technology that humans ever invented is a team of humans. I really believe that. So like we still have to, work on that. Um, but yeah, the new tech comes with new syntax, and it comes with um, mm, different ways of perhaps even a paradigm shift, like I'm talking about with how these things work within our team, as opposed to being the tool, the single player thing that I use in a terminal.
Yeah, and different ways of thinking about um, how we get those tasks done. Right, that
Yeah.
single player mode of like go do my bidding, now go do my bidding again, really shifts when you start to have many open. I've certainly experienced this when I have many agents open, and I would even add that there's an interesting moment when the agent asks you to do something. I've had this now happen a few times where
Yes.
I'm asking, I describe a task, like it goes off and runs, and then suddenly it comes back and it's not asking like, can I use this tool? Like that's just
Yeah.
permissions. I mean, it
Right.
literally comes back and says, okay, everything here is done, but you need to go do this because I have no way to do it. And I know that in talking to some folks, there are folks who feel offended. They feel really challenged by being asked to go do a task by an agent. But I'm always excited, like, oh, this is awesome. It figured out the one thing where I could be most helpful and solved all the rest.
I mean, you bring up a really good point. I mean, I do think of my perspective on AI generally is, I'm in favor of cyborgs, not robots. Like these things are augmentation. but yeah, I mean, I think it's one thing for Claude to tell me, hey, you probably need to open up this other thing and change this thing here, but, or, I don't have access to this tool, but like, but, but I don't think it's a positive thing when, an agent is going to like interact with it as a teammate and tell you what to do. I don't think that's going to work at all. Like they're robots. But well, I'll give you a great example. I remember back in the day, there was some piece of software that would interact on Slack and would provide icebreaker questions to the team. And good intentions there. Let's get some conversations going. But if you ever use something like that, and you're a contributor, can you imagine how you feel? Like what you think your manager thinks about you,
Yeah,
that he's
that
not
that
going
was
to
the
ask you
question.
or she's not going to ask you the question. They're going to have a bot in Slack ask it, and then you're going to reply in a channel, and maybe everybody sees it. That is like, talk about trust erosion. So yeah, I'm changing my answer a little bit here from what you said before, but 'cause I do think like we are ahead, we are above the robots. Like they work for us. Um, this notion of declaring intent is not about making them equals in my mind. It's about finding ways to work with them.
That resonates. I find my trust increases when anyone or thing I'm working with um, can appropriately reflect its limits.
Mm, yeah,
That
it's a great
that
point.
and it doesn't mean that it's not about admitting defeat or some other crazy thought around that. It's just these are the things I can do and these are the things I can't.
Yes.
And so, and if anyone, whether it's an agent or person, when it comes back and says, this is a part I can't do, maybe you can, or find another solution for, that actually elevates the bar for me because now I feel as though, okay, there was some measure of competence and awareness of competence. You performed the task that you were aware that you
Mm,
had competence for, and you paused. And that's the context in which I like to be tasked by an agent.
yes.
So to me,
Okay.
that's essentially the same.
Yes.
It's the I can't do this, but maybe you can. I stop. This is where I'm stopping. So, um,
Well,
but I
there's the
absolutely
skill, right?
agree.
Like that's hard.
Yeah,
It,
yeah,
yep. Yeah.
quite hard, especially because they're so eager.
Yep.
Henry, this was a great conversation today. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing.
appreciate it. Yeah, great to be on the podcast, Matt. Appreciate the nod.
Absolutely. Thank you.